On a day like today, we passed the time away, writing love letters in the sand. How you laughed when I cried each time I saw the tide take our love letters from the sand. There was a little cove behind our house, a private cove. Our steps were the only path down to the cove, so it was ours alone for all practical purposes. Kathy and I would stroll along, watching the waves break over the sand. When the tide was ebbing one day, Kathy picked up a stick. "Wait here, John," she instructed me, and ran down the beach. I saw her scraping in the sand for a while before she called me to join her. As I approached, I could see what she had written. "John, I love you, unconditionally. You are my total world. I will always be your girl. There is my pledge to love my John forever." She smiled beautifully. "Only John, forever." I took her in my arms, and we made love there, in the sand. Of course, the next day that forever pledge was gone, washed away by the tide. But from then on, we each began writing love letters in the sand. She always addressed hers to John. I asked her why, since who else would they be for? Kathy would just smile at me and shrug. I'd laugh and take her into my arms. I loved making love on the firm, damp sand. I'd point out the divots her butt cheeks made in the sand and tell her I'd know her imprint anywhere. I work as a troubleshooter for Milton Industries. In point of fact, I work for the owner, Amos Milton. He uses me to check out his deals and trouble spots, trusting me to find the hidden problems or assets his official acquisition and merger team might have missed. Amos always said, "Nothing gets past John," and nothing ever did. When I looked over the paperwork for the Tempe trucking and distribution buyout, something didn't ring true. I compared it to the trucking companies we owned and to others whose records I could access and realized what bothered me. Their payroll was much too small. Their staff wasn't large enough for the amount of freight they claimed to move. Either they discovered a new method of warehousing and shipping, or something was rotten in Denmark. On the other hand, their contracts with various companies had fee schedules that were 25% higher than what the competition was charging. The acquisition team thought this was wonderful. I thought it was another red flag. Why would several companies be willing to pay such high rates? "Amos, I know this deal is highly recommended by your team, but why not give me a couple of weeks? I'll go down and check it out, see what's different about this company. Give me a chance to dig into it." He agreed, and I was off for at least 2 weeks, maybe more. Kathy wasn't happy with that. She always hated it when I had to go away. But the homecomings are always epic. 2 to 3 weeks. You're going to be gone for at least 2 weeks. Kathy hated being home alone. I promised her I'd be back as soon as possible. My first glance at the warehouse operations gave lie to Temp's employment roster. Just on the warehouse floor, I could see more employees than the payroll rolls claimed. That didn't include the office personnel, sales, accounting, the execs, clerks, etc. I went back through the personnel records, looking for a weak link. I found it in William Mortimer, the comptroller. He was 67 and set to retire. I found his reserved parking space and followed him from his office to his home. I knew he was a bachelor and hoped he lived alone as I rang his bell. As the door opened, I announced, "Bill, I'm John Anthony from Milton Industries, and I want to know if your retirement fund could use some extra funds." He knew immediately why I was there and demanded $100,000. I countered with $25,000, but ended up settling for $50,000. He was greedy, but not too disappointed. I was right. The deal was a setup. Several of Amos's enemies had circled, hoping to get one over on the canny industrialist. Most of the staff was paid through another entity and didn't appear on the rosters Milton was given. The companies that Temp was contracted with were owned, through shell corporations, by his enemies. Lastly, the employees had a company union that planned to go on strike the week Milton took over. Unable to complete the shipping commitments, the companies would cancel their overpriced contracts, leaving Milton with nothing but an empty warehouse for the millions invested. The striking employees would be compensated and absorbed by other companies. It was a neat trap, but a sloppy one. I suggested to Amos that he might be able to turn the tables by having staff on hand to replace the strikers and make the contracted companies pay out on the outrageous fees their honeypot included. I heard Amos sigh over the phone. "No, John, you get in bed with criminals, cheats, and liars, and you just lower yourself. In any case, they'd never honor those contracts. It's not worth it. I'm not happy about that $50,000 you paid out, but I guess it was worth it to avoid the trouble." He laughed. "Besides, I'm sure it cost them more to set up this con than that. Come on home, John." Wrapped it up in a day and a half. Personal best for me. I headed home. The house was empty when I got home, just 2 days after I'd left. I decided to surprise Kathy and hadn't called ahead. It wasn't strange for her to be out for an afternoon. She must be out with a friend, since her car was still in the garage. I changed into trunks and went down to the beach for a dip while I waited. I smiled when I saw the love letter that my wife had written for me in the sand. She must be lonely, missing me. I give you my soul and my body. You take me to new heights. I'll be honest, it choked me up, this unsolicited declaration of love from my wife. Then I saw the disturbed sand not far from my wife's note. I recognize that particular disturbance. Kathy and I have made that same mess many times on this beach. Her butt print was distinctive, as were the other impressions in the sand. Apparently, some things do get by me. I left the beach, changed out of my trunks, and collected my luggage and my financial paperwork, otherwise leaving the house as I had found it. Kathy and I didn't have a prenup. We had nothing when we got married, and we were deeply in love. Who gets a prenup under those conditions? You made a vow that you would ever be true, but somehow that vow meant nothing to you. I checked into a motel down the coast from my home and headed into the office. I picked up 3 of the specially modified DJI Matrix 350 RTK drones I used for research on Milton's prospective acquisitions, and told Amos I'd need to take several weeks off. Since there were no deals on the immediate horizon, he was happy to agree. I packed the drones into the company camper/pickup and took off, leaving my car at the office. The pickup was equipped with a 220-volt generator, which could fully recharge a drone in 60 minutes. With a 55-minute flying time, I could have gotten good coverage with 2, but 3 allowed me to comfortably charge the down drones while overlapping coverage to ensure no time gaps. I parked at the state beach up the coast, less than 10 minutes flying time from my cove. I figured I'd send down a drone for 35 minutes, then call it back, giving me a 10-minute safety buffer on the flying time. When it was out for 25 minutes, I'd launch the second, then 25 minutes later launch the third. The cycle would repeat as the drone recharged. The drones were equipped with high-def cameras with SD cards, but I also recorded the video on my computer as it was transmitted back. The beach was empty as the view from the first drone came up around the point. I kept the drone up by the trees that topped the point, making it harder to see from my house. Kathy was home now, however. I caught her carrying a tray out of the kitchen onto the deck, where a stranger was sitting. I watched them eat lunch, then retreat into the house. The stranger wrapped his arm around Kathy's waist as they entered the house, his hand slipping down to grab her rear. When the door closed, I zipped the drone to the front of the house, hoping to get a look at the stranger's car, but there was no car in the driveway. Had they Ubered to the house? Why didn't they just take Kathy's car? I took a chance and moved the drone to the window on the side of the garage. Inside, I could see 2 cars, Kathy's, and a Tesla. We didn't have a Tesla. I recalled the drone, figuring that I wasn't likely to get any shots this late in the day. I hurried back to the office and picked up 2 trail cameras. My driveway was long, with trees on either side. I parked behind the woods and walked through until I was in sight of my driveway. Then I carefully approached, finding trees on either side where I could position the trail camera to monitor the cars coming in or leaving the property. Back at the pickup, I checked the computers, The cameras were up and functioning. At this point, I was cursing myself for not having invested in a home security system. Cameras would have been helpful right about now. I gave up for the night. Either I'd catch his car leaving, or he was with my wife that night. Kathy called me at 9 o'clock with her usual, "I miss you so much" call, which she made every night when I was away. "Yeah, I miss you too," was all the reply I could muster. "Honey, you sound depressed. Are you okay?" asked the concerned and caring wife. "I'm fine. It's just been a stressful day. I'm learning that you can't trust anyone." I sighed. "No one. Oh, I'm sure you'll work it all out. You always do." She gave a fake yawn. "Honey, it's been a long day and I'm worn out." "I bet you are." I thought. "I'm heading to bed. Good night. I love you." With that, she hung up, anxious to get back to bed with her paramour. The next morning, I was at the state beach at 7 o'clock a.m. and had the drones up by 7:30. It wasn't until 9:30 that Kathy and her friend ran naked down the stairs to the beach for a quick dip. Then, while the man dried off, Kathy scratched at the sand. Later, I moved the drone down for a closer look. "John, it's always been you. Without you, I'm blue. I think it's time to make love." While she was obviously not a poet, her attempted verse confused me. Was she now writing love notes to me? After spending the night with this fellow, I'd seen enough, recorded enough. I didn't want or need to see more. I pulled in the drones and shut down the surveillance. I could hardly breathe and had to wait until my eyes cleared enough to drive back to the motel. I guess they went out to dinner, because the trail cams caught the Tesla coming down the drive. Oregon plates, coastal playground plates. Coastal playground. How appropriate. Maybe that should be Kathy's new nickname. I put a call into the PI firm I used for Milton Industries and gave them the plate number, GW 44740. It only took 30 minutes before I received the email identifying the Tesla owner as John Bristol, 27, salesman. He lived 80 miles away, with his wife and 3 kids. He had a family, a home, yet he had to steal mine. I looked up the phone number for Mr. Bristol's home and gave it a call. A pleasant-sounding woman answered. "Hello." "Hi," I began. "I'm trying to locate a John Bristol that I went to high school with." I left it hanging, hoping she'd fill in some blanks. "Oh, you went to Beaverton High. What year?" Mrs. Bristol asked, helpfully. I froze for a moment. My wife's alma mater was Beaverton High, and she had graduated in 2016, but she was only 26, with a birth date in April. I didn't know Bristol's birth date. Had he been in her class? I took a guess. Graduated 2015. Oh, a year ahead of John. "Well, John's away for a few days on business. Can I pass on a message, mister?" she asked. Still thinking of Kathy being with her classmate, I answered truthfully, "John Anderson." It was her turn to be quiet. Then, almost hesitantly, John's high school girlfriend married an Anderson. I put her off. It's a common name. I have several cousins that still live in Beaverton. I'm not married, though. I was cursing myself for not using an alias. Then I thought, at least I'm being truthful. After all, at this point I felt I no longer have a wife. I really wasn't married. "Please tell John that I called. He can reach me at this number." I repeated the number in case her phone hadn't captured it. "Thanks for your help, Mrs. Bristol. I hope to talk with you again sometime." I wasn't surprised when Kathy called early that evening. I figured that Bristol had spoken to his wife, and she passed on my message. I let the call go to voicemail and listened to it later. "John." There was a pause. "John, did you call John Bristol's house today?" I went to high school with John Bristol, and he called here, thinking that I might have called. I wondered how she was going to explain his having her number after almost 10 years. He thought maybe I was calling about a reunion or something. Kathy sounded subdued. There was a long pause. "John, please call me back." I didn't. I turned off my phone and didn't see her other voicemails until the next morning when I turned the phone back on. There were 4 of them. Before I could decide if I wanted to bother listening to them, my phone rang again. Out of habit, I answered. "John, it's Kathy. You never called me back," my wife said quietly. "I didn't want to interrupt your evening," I replied. Kathy was quiet. I thought she might have hung up when she spoke again. "What do you mean?" "Well, I know you've brought your lover onto my beach, into my bed." I kept my teeth clenched to keep from shouting. Kathy half gasped and half sobbed. "No, John. No." We were quiet on our separate ends of the line for several minutes. "Are you coming home?" my wife wanted to know. "I'll come home," I answered. "I'll come home when you and your lover are out of my house. Why don't you go back to Beaverton with him? I'm sure his wife will like that." Kathy was openly crying now. "Our home, John. Our home." "No, it's my name on the lease. My parents bought it for me before our wedding. It had been our home, but now it was just my house." "It was a wedding present, John, to both of us," Kathy countered. "The house was deeded to me before the wedding, in my name only. That my parents did that shows intention. If it were a gift to us both, the deed would have said so," I retorted. "And I want you out now." "But John, nothing happened. Nothing." I cut Kathy off. "I have pictures, video of you on the beach, naked on the beach, together." I had trouble finishing that sentence, remembering the scene. Kathy was quiet. Finally, I continued. "I want you out. Just leave an address that I can send the divorce papers to." I heard a new sob. "But John, I love you. Can't you just forgive me?" It came out in a moan. "I have one question for you, Kathy. When you wrote in the sand, were any of those messages for me?" I asked. Kathy let out a wail, followed by more sobs and tears. "I guess that's my answer. Why would you want me to come home? To pay the bills?" I inquired. "John, I love you," she sniffled. "I need him, can't you understand, please? I love you, but I need him." Now I have to ask, why? Did I really want to know? It's always been that way, since high school. We don't really get along. We don't love each other. He's always had a girl. She laughed. He's even got a wife he loves, despite. Well, she's not a touchy-feely person. But sexually, we just click. But there's no love, John. I only love you. I was quiet for a minute. Then I asked, "Do you remember that first love letter you wrote at the beach?" Because I do. I cleared my throat, not quite sure of my voice, but began, "John, I love you, unconditionally. You are my total world. I will always be your girl. And we've established that none of your notes were about me." I hung up the phone. I didn't need this. The next day, I called Mrs. Bristol back and admitted who I was. I asked if she wanted me to send a copy of the video. "Why?" she asked. "Well, he's being unfaithful to you. Don't you want proof?" I wondered. "I know he's cheating on me." I heard her snort. "I've got 3 kids I never wanted. He's got to be unfaithful if he ever wants to be intimate again. Your wife's welcome to him, as long as he keeps paying the bills." Kathy had understated just how not touchy-feely this woman was. In the end, everyone, almost, got what they wanted. Mrs. Bristol never had to be intimate with anyone ever again. In less than a year, she also got help raising her kids from my ex-wife, who now had one of her own to care for. John got to be intimate and have more kids. Kathy got the boy of her dreams in alimony from me, at least for the next 5 years. As I said, almost everyone. I got to keep the house I already owned and got to pay alimony to my ex. Since her lover is already married, there's little chance of it being stopped early. In the meantime, she keeps calling me, even after the divorce was final, insisting that she loves me. When she mentioned her student loans, it gave the lie to her proclamations of love. But it made me smile. There was a silver lining. I had just rid myself of over $150,000 in student loans that I had been paying off. Loans that Kathy had taken out to fund her worthless Renaissance poetry degree. Either she'd have to get her new John to pick up the bill, or see what kind of job her degree would get her. Now my broken heart aches with every wave that breaks over love letters in the sand. I don't go down to my beach as much as I used to, but without Kathy's student loans, I have plenty of money to go on single cruises. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.